Welcome to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership, where you'll hear insights and useful strategies, as well as lessons learned from other nonprofit leaders and valuable tips from a variety of experts. Here to help you with the challenges and opportunities you face day after day is your host and nonprofit leadership expert, Sarah Olivieri.
Hello, nonprofit leaders, and welcome to your go-to place for information and inspiration to help you be even more effective. I'm your host, Sarah Olivieri, and you're listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. My guest for this episode is James Thorne, who is a passionate creator dedicated to empowering individuals, families, and communities through entrepreneurial opportunities. In a career that has spanned a range of industries, from hospitality to ministry, from filmmaking to marketing and business coaching, James has managed teams, led departments, and built several businesses from the ground up. James is currently the owner and chief people officer for Quirk, founder and CEO of Vehicle for Good, and owner of Bowtie Media. He's got a lot of different perspectives to bring to us, and he lives in the heart of Fort Worth with his wife and kids. Welcome, James. What a background. Can you just tell us a little bit more about who you are before we dive into some specific questions?
No, thank you, Sarah. I'm grateful to be on your show, and hello, everyone. I appreciate the kind comments. I think I've learned a lot over the past 20 years, and I think you covered it pretty well. There's definitely some questions we can dive into, but it's spanned from a wide range of things, and now we focus a lot on nonprofit work. We do a lot of work with nonprofits, smaller nonprofits, helping them market, fundraise. I built a team around that on a for-profit side, and then we have a nonprofit that actually helps bring funding to nonprofits that need it. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, with such kind of like a diverse background in for-profit and nonprofit activities, could you just tell us a little bit about what kinds of business frameworks, entrepreneurial frameworks have you brought to the nonprofit space to help create sustainable revenue streams or sustainable operating practices? I'd love to hear your experience with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the biggest things that I've learned probably over the past 5 years that I shifted a lot from more traditional mindset and how to build a team, right? When you feel like you got to have everyone around you and you got to have them in the same space and know what everyone is doing, right? To see what's getting done. And I did that a lot in ministry and some churches I was a part of, but also some other work I did before that where we had them all in office and I had a team and loved it. I think everyone could attest COVID disrupted that for you to kind of figure that out. But a lot of people have gone back to that because it's more comfortable to have them in the same space. And I really started trying to figure out how I could set up a structure for the ones that worked for me to also have the same freedoms that I desired. And if I could get them on the same page of the dreams and aspirations that they had that didn't have to even do with our job, and how we could create a life around that, that was kind of the thought process. And I started reaching out to other people that were doing the same things and trying to figure out how to structure our team differently. And we've done a lot of different things since then in the past 5 years, but how our team is set up now on both Quirk and Vehicle for Good, so the for-profit and nonprofit, is they are all contractors that get paid for the different work that they do, some almost like a salary, that also benefit from the jobs that we bring in, so they make even more money whenever I do as well. And that has allowed to create a lot of freedom for them and the dynamic of the team. So that's been probably one of the biggest things the past so many years that I've moved to, and everyone is now remote. We all work remote completely in our own space. I don't even know half the time when someone's doing something. And we just agree on when things get done. One person on the team, they love baseball, their son's in baseball, and they're gone a lot with tournaments, and that's fine as long as we're getting stuff done and we can, set certain meetings up. So yeah.
I love that. I've actually maybe one of the few folks who was running an all remote team since 3 or 4 years before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, it was like, finally everyone knows how to use Zoom because we were already been using it for years. But
Right.
I remember like 3 years into working with one of my, kind of main team members, we finally met in person at a conference. And we were all excited, like, we're gonna finally meet each other. And then we actually met each other. It's like, oh, like I already know you. Like the
Right.
gap between our experience of working remotely through all sorts of things and then and it helps when you see each other. I think there's a much bigger gap between just phone.
Right.
But like all the times we'd spent on projects together and then in person it was just like
Right.
it's like,
Right.
oh well now I know what type of coffee you order, right? Like it was really like
Right.
really small. It was very anticlimactic. It was like, oh, like I feel like I actually hang out with you all the time, almost in person.
Right.
So it really, really resonates with me. I'm curious, as it sounds like you're talking about, some kind of revenue sharing model. What were your inspirations for that?
It really was kind of getting out of the way of what I wanted to realize that it's very similar to what other people wanted. Now, I do think there are different mindsets and way we're built and structured that some just would rather work for someone or someone would rather be on a team than run it, and that all makes sense. But there are freedoms that we want to create for our future, and instead of thinking someday, what could we do now to create more of that environment? And I would say most people on our team, even myself, we don't even work 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
We're able to really clump in and say, this is what I'm really good at. I'm going to focus on this. You focus on what you're really good at. And then let's spend time with our family or do the things that are important to us. Because the job at the end of the day, regardless of what it's for, I believe we're doing really great work. Love our work. Love it so much. But that's not the end all be all. 20 years from now, it's all going to look different. So that's kind of where it just inspired me to spend more time with the people that we're investing in, and what does that look like, and what do they desire, and how could we make that mold? And it's actually changed what we offer and what we do and how we operate as a company because it's been molded by the team versus one person.
Yeah, that's so key. And for anyone out there thinking like, oh, how could that be? I mean, I just can attest to my own experience running teams, really focusing on everybody doing what they're great at and bringing as many brains to the table as possible and leveraging the thinking power of a group rather than just one person. I mean, I have to measure it in months because how many hours a month I work because it's not that
Mhm.
much. These days I work, like 60 hours a month.
Mhm.
And I've worked as low as 45. That was a little too not enough, partly for the business and partly for me because I, like you, I love my
Mhm.
work. And I know that for me, 90 is too much. But things hum
Mhm.
along at like when I'm working 60 to 65 hours. And it's not really about the number of hours, right? It's about how
Right.
effective I am. That's just happens to be because I track it where I know the sweet spot is as far as hours, and I know the kinds of things that I need to be doing, and what
Mhm.
each of my team members, need to be doing. So that's interesting. But let's dive into your work. So tell us about I think I'd love to hear especially about Vehicle for Good, but also about Quirk as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So it all started with Quirk when I stepped out on my own to really do something myself, try to figure it out. I really had the entrepreneurial itch where I'd been doing stuff on the side for years and finally stepped out October of 2018 to try to build a remote team around marketing that could support nonprofits. I had two really good friends of mine that stepped out to launch different nonprofits, and we've been working with them ever since. And I just wanted to support them at first and try to figure out if we could mesh in some of what I've learned, but also try to reach out to some things that we've built frameworks around. And Quirk today is supporting smaller nonprofits with their marketing fundraising. We're helping them identify the right type of donors to go after, how to attract them in, and there's a lot of marketing involved, a lot of advertising involved, a lot of digital work, but all of that is to get the right donors into their cause, the love what they do, and stay engaged. out of that birthed Vehicle for Good, which launched 2.5 years ago. That the number one issue, which is why we started Quirk too, is fundraising, right? So it's like, that's the biggest issue. Even a for-profit company, my business coach always says the number one rule is don't run out of money, right? So nonprofits, an added layer to that is they have to go find it and they have to bring it in outside of selling products. And there are ways to do that as well. But Vehicle for Good really launched out of how can we create a funding source ourselves through what we've learned to kind of put proof in the pudding too. Like, we can do this ourselves, raise money, and then we can just give that money away. So we launched a sweepstakes, which is a national sweepstakes. We give away cars. We've used in our own marketing and advertising to bring people in. One person wins a really sweet ride, but then we raise enough money to cut a check to the nonprofit that's involved each time that we do it. And that's been really fun because I don't have to go sell a service. We get to do what we already do well, and I get to call a nonprofit, tell them that they're going to be the beneficiary, and then I get to give away a car to someone at the end, which is really cool.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. But I have to ask the question, when you think about donor retention and building relationship with donors, how do you kind of cross that bridge? Or is this one of those activities that is good at bringing in cash, but isn't going to bring in huge lifetime value?
Yeah, that is the number one question when we talk to our nonprofits. Absolutely. So it is definitely, I would say, higher 80% side of we're just bringing in mass amounts of money, right? The more money we can bring in, the more we can do with it to build other things with, right? So that's how I'm seeing it first. There are a smaller percentage of people that come in for the cause, and you can tell who they are. They're the ones donating more money. They're the ones that are more engaged during the process. And we're creating an avenue for them to plug directly to the nonprofit. So, hey, looks like you're loving what's going on here. It looks like you're really a part for the cause, not just the car. Why don't you join their list, right? Get on their list. And there's probably 8 to 10%, right, of people coming in that are more engaged for the cause that we're able to pull from. So it does build a list. Yeah. It does help build some list. Because the sweepstakes we're running right now, we've already brought in over 6,500 people in the past few months that have donated, right? So take that percentage. The more we build off that, the bigger that will be. But also the more money we raise, from my perspective, allows them to have more room to figure that out, right? When you're smaller and you operate on $300,000 a year, it's hard. It is hard, and I get it. But if you had a little more money to make some decisions, then hopefully we can get closer to some of their goals and how they're bringing nonprofits in, or not nonprofits, but donors.
Yeah, interesting that you use the word decisions. I think often in a lot of nonprofits, right, they say their biggest problem is we don't have enough money. And usually what I find, because I love fun, I'm always asking, what's the core problem? What's the root cause here? And usually the root cause, 90% of the time, the root cause of, or maybe I should say, there's two things that happen. One is there aren't enough staff, or particularly there aren't enough leadership, qualified people focused on fundraising. Right. I can go again and again, and I had to do this activity where we can chart out what functions of a nonprofit different people are focusing on. And most of the nonprofits who don't have enough money, literally are just understaffed in the fundraising part of the function. It's not able to put the time, expertise, money, attention. And that speaks, when you said decisions, I'm like, yes, right? Because you need to have bandwidth and expertise to make good fundraising decisions on. And I think when it comes to fundraising decisions, the big mistake I see people making is picking the wrong type of fundraising to focus on first, or just, I hate it when I see you need to diversify how you're fundraising, because for most organizations, that's terrible advice, especially if you're small. And I think you're doing some work around major gifts and things clearly you've done. So what do you see are the most effective types of fundraising activities that nonprofits should be focused on?
Yeah, I'll take 10.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Even in a for-profit business, when you start out on your own, right, and you're trying to build a team, you have to be the sales guy. You have to, right? You have to be the person that can bring it in, or it just won't work. And so you get enough team to start building your money to build that out. In the same way with a nonprofit, when we talk with leaders and they're so small, they have to some degree be good at fundraising. They have to figure out how to build connections, and even if it's just not their strength, right? And that happens. You still have to build a muscle that can be worked out, and it's hard for a lot. And I still talk to people, they're friends of mine, that like, I just don't think I'm really good at it. We've been doing it for 10 years, right? Like, and you may not be wrong. You may not be the best at it, but you have to figure it out. So when you say practices, that's where it gets tricky, because that's another thing too we have to be really careful on as a marketing agency. You can't ever really promise anything, right? You can't. And we're very upfront with the people we work with. Hey, this is things we've tried, these things have worked, here's where we're at. End of the day, it may not work, right? And here's what we're going to charge, is what this looks like. So practice for us, yes, starts with the core team. How you're building your connections is very important. Now, we can help with that a little bit on helping kind of structure some communication around the connections that you make. But if they're not well networked with people already, it's going to be really hard for us to have a base to stand on. So if we talk about best practices, really it's kind of before us, right? We'll even bring people come to us and say, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. That's great. We don't think we're the right fit today until you figure out ABC, right? And I wouldn't say that I'm the best at knowing all of those things, because that's not our strong suit to help them build, but it's an understanding up front where, hey, you've got to build a good network. You've got to there's some traditional things that even when I first, I stepped out of the corporate world, in the food industry, being a GM, and started raising my own support full time, right? To get people to support what I was doing in some sort of ministry work. And it was awful. I hated it. I just wanted to go do what I felt like I was supposed to do. And but I had to figure out, I had to grind and really figure out. It took a couple of years before I, within a month, could raise a full year of my support. And so that's part of the grind I think that people have to walk through. That, but also you put your time in, right? And you see the fruit down later. And I do think it's okay to pause some of the programs that you're building to make sure you're building a solid foundation in your fundraising and how you set your team up.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. It is 100% okay to pause your programming completely, even if you have to pause all of it. Right. If you're being like, but Sarah, we don't have any money. Like, you can pause all of your programming to invest your time and energy in funding. And in the end, your programming will be bigger, badder, more effective. Badder in the best sense, right? More effective.
Right,
You will make a bigger impact. You will help more people by pausing and raising money. If you're really that tight on funds, than you will by trying to like trudge through and run it while not raising money very effectively.
My business coach always says, you started out right, so it ends right.
Yeah.
If you started out wrong, you spend the rest of your time trying to fix it.
Great
and habit. That has been a driving force for me from everything that I've started and going. And he's been coaching me for 5 years. And that has been just every time I make a decision to something new, I'm like, okay, I need to make sure it starts out right. And that could be a number of layers. And it might take 6 months to get it, to a place where I'm like, okay, I feel like it started right. Versus just launching something. Like, we love to launch things and try things. Someone comes out with a new nugget and everyone just jumps on it, right? Like, oh, we'll just try it. It's got to work for me too. And sometimes that takes months or years to really establish, and it's worth it because you want the thing you dream about. Nonprofits, listen, the thing you dream about in the future of the impact you're making in the world, the only way that's sustainable is when you put the work in up front.
Yeah.
And so, think about the end result versus what you're trying to do right now to drum it up. You'll be doing that for a decade from now if you keep doing that.
Yeah, really true. We're going to take a quick break. Then I have so many follow-up questions. I'll have to think about paring them down, or we could be here all day. I want to bring to you a gift for this episode. We're here. I'm here. My guests are here to bring you inspiration and tips like we've been talking about today. But for some of you, you'd love even more. You'd love bite-sized tips in your inbox every week. And so you can go to pivotground.com /sign up to get bite-sized tips on one topic that I put together for you every week in your inbox, as well as announcements about new episodes and such and trainings coming out. All right, I want to get back to my conversation here. So maybe the question I'll focus on, because I think this is really helpful for nonprofit leaders to hear, is like, with your services, let's start with your marketing services, and we can do the same for Vehicle for Good. How do you know if somebody's not ready? Like, what are the things you're looking for them to have in place very specifically before they're thinking about doing this digital marketing type of campaign stuff?
So I think, numbers don't lie. So the only thing that I can really look at true data without people making assumptions, or, usually ask questions, and people always love to dream up really big. But the reality is, if we don't have 1,000 people on an email list, or if we don't see so many activity on their website, or there's some things there that we know we can have some easy wins, right? For us, we always look for that easy win we can walk away from, give them something to go, yes, that was awesome. And if we could do that first, that helps us create some longevity with that client. But we know they've done the work even if they don't have an email list of that many, but they can pull out a booklet and they've got names written down, of 100 to 200 people, like they've been doing their work. We then will try to apply some of the things that we've done in our automation, our structure, and say, hey, let's try this. But we always look for that list first. Most of the money we raise is on email. And we are running ads and things too, but that's building through the email list.
Right. Email, not
and
dead.
some of our,
it's like never going to die.
Oh my gosh, it is amazing what you can raise.
Email.
It's amazing. I sent an email Saturday and made $10,000 in 5 hours, right? Like it's amazing what you can do in an email. So but knowing, like looking at the numbers, right? That's where we start. We'll kind of look there, and if they don't really have that or set up, there's a few things that we can give them at a small, like a small drip piece or just a little skin in the game for them. But we've got resources that we give them. We've got a book that we came out with last March called Lasting Donor Locator. That's something that's an easy handoff for us that shows what we're doing to get them to this place of how to market them the right way. And what I tell people is the first half of the book is what we wish nonprofits did before they came to us. And the second half is what we actually do for them. So that's sometimes a good place for us to go, hey, take this resource. If you put the time in, some of the work, we promise it'll see some results. But to answer your question, I look at numbers first, and we don't always know right away by looking at that, but that's where we start.
Yeah. And then how about for Vehicle for Good? How do you pick your nonprofit to work with? How does that process work, or what should nonprofits know?
Yeah. So we did get a 501c3 through the IRS to work with nonprofits that can't afford professional marketing and fundraising, right? So it is meant for the smaller crowd to give them some funding. We get to kind of determine what that looks like, right? We're kind of held responsible to our own bylaws on that, but we're looking for nonprofits that do not spend more than $100,000 a year in their marketing and fundraising. They do not have anyone full-time that would have a title that is development, marketing, fundraising. And right now we have 3 buckets that we're working from: people that are helping with food, water, shelter. The second bucket being foster, adoption, reunification, and the third, poverty, homelessness, veterans. Those are kind of our 3 buckets right now. We'll expand them more in the future, but people can actually go to vehicleforgood.com, fill out an application, they go through the process, and then our board goes through those applications. And we are working more right now with people we've done work with over the past 5 years, right? We've been people that we would love to help. But we see this too, where we'll be able to do a sweepstakes every month and support 10 nonprofits a month. We'll get to the place where that money is just, we've almost doubled every time we've done a sweepstakes, and the amount of money raised. So we see a pretty big future there, and very exciting one.
Yeah, I love it. As I'm thinking about what you're saying about, the size of nonprofits and what they need to have in place and this kind of pre-work, I've come to use some new language recently around donor segments. So that the traditional is like major gifts, and then there's kind of this nebulous area of, is it like digital fundraising or smaller gifts, but I've kind of been renaming it as high touch donor relationship fundraising
Mm,
and scaled donor relationship fundraising. So a lot of digital is our stuff we can do at scale, right? And digital helps us
mhm.
have a more personalized relationship even at scale. But I'm wondering, it
Right.
sounds like, this kind of pre-work, right? Before you're ready sounds a lot like you need to know how to do high touch. That's what it sounds, you
Mm,
need to be able to have a conversation with the donor. You need to maybe kind of know
right.
what language resonates with them. You need to have enough, you mentioned like a list of 100, right? 100 really good relationships, people you really
Mm,
know and like why they're into you and what makes them tick
right.
and what you like about them, is such good information. And there's often a lot of, often it becomes major gifts, right? Because we can only have those super high touch relationships with so many people. That's different per person, right? Some people can have high touch relationships with hundreds of people and others can, only
Right.
maintain
Right.
50, but whatever your capacity is, right? At some point you have to focus on probably those that are bringing in more money. But I'm curious, like how that lands with you, that's that kind of thinking, because I've just started using that language in less than a year. So I'm curious how it resonates.
No, I like it. I agree. As my own example, when I talk about raising support for so many years, there was about 65 people that I got to that I had a really good, strong relationship with. I kept in touch with, and literally when I made a decision or I needed something or I needed some funding, I could reach out to them. But I even tested it once and sent a letter in the mail. I needed something that we were going on this big trip, and I had the money within 2 weeks, just sending one letter in the mail, and I didn't have to even call a single person. But I built those relationships over time, and I think it does prove, yes, when you get started, you also want to make sure what you're doing resonates, and it's always surprising who supports you and who doesn't,
Mm.
right? The ones you think. I made my list of 100 when I got started, and one person on that list joined in, and I had to go find the rest. But yeah, high touch, I like that. There are things that we do that can help with that and communication. Like we're helping identify their pitch and how they communicate and making sure it connects to the right type of people that would love who they are and what they're doing. But if they don't already have some of those people in the mix that we can reference to,
Yeah.
right? Well, why do they love being a part? What about them, makes them a really good fit? Actually, let's talk to them, right? Let's call those 20 people and ask them these questions. They would probably love to talk to you about it,
Oh, yeah.
and let's get that information because that will then feed how you communicate to the other people that are just like them. So there are things that we do in that, but we don't usually do ahead of that, knowing that we can't jump into some sort of campaign, right? We want to be able to then see some fruit and results from that. But yeah, I like that. High touch is great. I think it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, well, good. So, because we are getting close to time here, what would you like to leave people with, to know about what do you think is happening with the sector and your role in it? Um, or if you just want to share some final tips for people.
No, that's great. I think just recently we were looking at a lot of information that's showing the amount of people that are donating is less, right? It continues to decrease, but the ones who are donating more than ever before. So I think with what you're saying in the high touch and keeping focus is really good. You got to keep that network. But try to think outside the box. Some non-traditional ways to fundraise. There are ways to use your team when it comes to selling a service through your nonprofit. Ways to use your team to get them plugged into other things that make money. And like ours, we're now doing sweepstakes and running, there's other ways to figure this out. And we're actually going to build a model that we can show nonprofits to do it themselves, so that they can do sweepstakes on their own. But yeah, try to think outside the box, non-traditional, And at the end of the day, you love what you're doing. And again, think about that end result and dream about, those things you dream about. They're all attainable. It just might take a lot of work up front.
Yeah. The upfront work is the hardest, isn't it? Right? It gets so much easier if you do the upfront the right.
There's no such thing as an overnight success, right? It doesn't exist. I literally have friends that are influencers on social media that have blown up. And people are like, oh my gosh, how did they? And I'm like, well, if you would have known them, they spent 10 years grinding, doing things I never would have spent time doing, right? Yeah. And it's the same. It takes time. But I think you're a better result by the end. Your nonprofit's a better result because of it, and your team are too. So
yeah, I love it. How can people get in touch if they want to contact you or follow you? Tell me we'll put the links in the show notes as well, but what's the best way for people to find you?
I greatly appreciate it. Yeah. QuirkGrowth.com, Quirk Growth. I'm heavily connected there. I'm the #1 sales guy there, so you'll definitely find me easily. Vehicleforgood.com, if you want to go fill an application. Right now, I'm the face of that, so helping drive the communication and the pieces there. But yeah, go check out those sites. Would love to create more awareness for Vehicle for Good, because at the end of the day, we'll just get to give more money away the bigger this builds. So I appreciate you allowing me to do a shout out.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you out there listening, not only for all that you do to make our communities better, but the work that you put in that maybe nobody has seen, but we know you're putting the work in. And make sure that you take time for some self-care in the mix as well. And before you sign off, be sure to subscribe and think about listening to the next episode of Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Until then, all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.